We are committed to creating a safe and supportive space for our guests and listeners, and to provide information and tools that will help our listeners understand, manage, and overcome trauma. We understand that the healing journey can bring up challenging emotions. Therefore, we want to warn our audience that certain episodes may contain discussions or stories that could be triggering for some individuals. The content of the podcast is for educational and informative purposes only, and we encourage you to practice self-care and discretion while listening, and to reach out to a trusted support system or professional if you feel overwhelmed and need help on your healing journey. So today's guest is Gabrielle Pimstone. I said that right. Yay. So anyway, thank you for joining us today. I'm being silly. I'll stop being silly. And I'm just going to kind of go over a little bit of what we're going to talk about, which you are an energy coach, which I find fascinating. And some of the stuff that we're going to talk about is you're going to share your story. And the part I really like, I was just mentioning, is how childhood trauma set up patterns in your life, which I did that and didn't even realize it. So we'll talk about that. I love that. And then we're going to talk about your energy work. And then you also offer a 28 days to healing course, which will have all the links and everything for that. And then you do offer a freebie, which I think is really cool. And it's a 20-minute masterclass. And it's Journey Through Time, a guide to connecting with your future. I love that. I love that. So tell us about you.
Hello, everyone. Hey, Lisa, it's so great to be with you. I remember when we met a few weeks ago, we actually couldn't stop talking. So I'm wondering whether an hour is going to actually be enough for us, but it's great to be here. Yeah, I am an energy coach. I'm also a specialist in human transformation. I've been working with the human response to change for 27 years in a corporate setting. And one of the things I've learned through my own personal journey of healing and transformation is that, there's this saying that people resist change. I actually don't believe it. I think people resist change if it doesn't improve their lives. But I actually think we all have the innate desire to shift and grow and step into the best version of ourselves. So I really help clients find joy and fulfillment in healing and transformation as well.
Beautiful.
So I've got a 27-year corporate background, but a few years ago, I upskilled and I became an energy master level 3, and I now bring energy practice into the work that I do.
So you're no longer in the corporate world though, right?
I am no longer permanently employed in the corporate world. I do get calls from time to time to do some facilitation. I'm an accredited group facilitator and I love doing that. So I come in and I run group process in organizations as well.
Yeah, I quit my corporate job almost 2 years ago, and it was, I don't want to, harp on how bad corporate America is, but it was really damaging on me. It was really hard on me, and I needed to get away from that kind of toxic environment. And it's toxic for everybody. It's toxic for everybody that's there.
It's difficult for a lot of people. And I was having lunch before the end of year Christmas break last year, and there were a few of us women. I was the only one who'd formally left the corporate world, and everyone else was still there and talking about such stress and strain that they were experiencing, but feeling unable to step out and make a change to their lives. And I understand that. It took me a number of years.
Yeah, it took me a long time to make that final decision too. And I actually probably held on to it a little longer than I should have, because it did take a toll on my health. But it was awkward when I first quit. It's weird. I'm not used to not having a job, right? But I quickly got over that and found a way around it and got healthier.
And it's true. You swap one stress for another in many ways. Yeah.
So let's get into your story and then explain to us what you meant when you talked about childhood trauma setting patterns up in your life, which I know what that means, but as you're telling your story, if you can explain that.
Yeah, I'll give you a real example. I'm very happy to share. So, most of us as kids have some form of trauma, from like capital T trauma, which is the big stuff, which is my case, to small letter T, which is, trauma nevertheless, but things like getting bullied, on the
Mm.
playground. Now, when I was 5, my dad was diagnosed with terminal cancer. He was a professor of medicine, so it was really difficult for him. And when I was 9, he passed away.
Mm.
And what was really interesting about that particular story is my father didn't speak about his illness. And he wanted to protect the children. Of course, my mother knew, but my brothers and I
You didn't know?
were not, we did, well, we knew, but we didn't know. Like, I'm deeply intuitive, and I had a very strong sense something was amiss. So that really was a defining experience in my life. And it got me really interested in psychology and also spirituality, both of those equally. And when I was very young, I was, just before my father passed away, I had my first very vivid dream. And it awoke me at night, and I decided to, I got onto my windowsill. I used to have a beautiful view from my windowsill. I took out my journal and I tried to make sense of the dream. So I started documenting dreams and analyzing my dreams at a very, very young age, which is quite unusual. And dreams to me both have a kind of a psychological but also spiritual component. And then after my dad passed away, I asked my mom if I could go and see a medium, and she said absolutely not. And so I kind of put spirituality on the back burner, and I moved forward with psychology as my career. And I worked in organizational psychology for 27 years, which was by and large a gratifying experience. But in the last four or 5 years, I started feeling a growing sense of discomfort. There were things in the corporate world that no longer fit my growth, where I was in my life. I found it very challenging dealing with corporate politics, and I was always working with it because by definition, my role and function required me to deal with conflict and fallout from corporate politics. And also the bureaucracy started really slowing me down. I couldn't make the kind of impact that I wanted to. And so I skilled up. I actually listened to a podcast one day. It was The Catalyst. I can talk about that if you want at another stage. But ultimately, I landed up studying energy, how to become an energy practitioner, an energy master. I did 3 levels. It took me 18 months. And now I bring that into the mix, and I help people heal through energy mastery, because it's the fastest way to heal. So that's the kind of broad brush of my story. But in terms of the second part of your question, which is, how does childhood trauma set up patterns in life? Well, what happened for me, and I think most people, is that when traumatic things happen when we are kids, we don't have the cognitive capacity to work through the trauma. We can't make sense of it. Like, how does an 8-year-old or 6-year-old make sense of the fact that a father's dying, this wonderful human being? And so what happened with my father is he passed away. He was about 48 years old, and he was at the prime of his career. He was a world-renowned professor of medicine. He had, job offers around the world, got a coin from the Nobel Institute. One day you'll get the real thing. And I'm telling you this for a reason, because then he died when he was in the prime, when all of this was happening. And he had a great relationship with my mum and 3 wonderful kids. And I developed a limiting belief. And a number of them, but one of my limiting beliefs was that you can't have it all. My dad had it all. So, because if you have it all, something's going to give.
The rug's going to get pulled out from under you.
Correct. My dad paid the ultimate price. So what ensued was that if some area of my life was going well, I'd sabotage other important areas of my life. That was the pattern that I was unconscious of for many years, that I've had to really let go of and release. The other thing is that I developed significant anxiety. You said we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. So the limiting belief, because I watched my dad really disintegrate over 5 years, that if I constantly worry I believed if I constantly worry and if I anticipate problems, I'll then prevent negative outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
You
Oh, I
know,
can relate to
there,
that one for sure.
the corollary to that, though, is it's very similar. If I'm not anxious, I'll get complacent and the rug will get pulled out
Ooh.
from under my feet, right? So that set up a cycle for me of just waiting for the other shoe to drop and not being able to appreciate, take in the good times and also the kinds of self-sabotaging behaviors that I alluded to earlier when things got too good. So that's an example of how childhood trauma can set up limiting beliefs and dysfunctional patterns. And of course, you can imagine, how that just enveloped my life.
Yeah, and what that reminded me of is I grew up in chaos, right? And so when there wasn't chaos in my adult life before I really began my healing, the anxiety would rise and I would create chaos somehow, some way. I would somehow find chaos to stir up. And it's not, and it is the craziest thing because I can remember thinking in my head, I hate this. I hate this chaos. And yet it was my normal.
Well, I want to go with that because it's so profound what you just said. I also hated the anxiety, by the way. It had become my normal, and by that I mean it had wedged into my identity. Who would I
Ooh,
be?
yeah.
Yeah, who would I be if I wasn't anxious? Who would you have been if you weren't in chaos and there wasn't drama happening, around you? So, so that's the interesting bit, and I think that's one of the reasons why we stay stuck in negative patterns, because
Hmm.
even if we hate them, we are identified with them. And yeah, and so that's a really interesting phenomenon that, how can you be comfortable in the discomfort? Well,
I call it
you
comfortably
know,
uncomfortable.
yes,
Okay.
exactly.
It's
So
crazy.
that's one of the biggest blocks to transformation, to human transformation, which is why it's so important when somebody's stepping into a healing journey that we really work at an identity level with them.
Mhm.
Because until you can change behaviors, you can manage and regulate your emotions. But if the story you tell yourself, your self concept hasn't shifted, actually, you're not going to change much at all. And that's really one of the biggest opportunities in transformation, is to really break open your identity and look at the story and the labels and the roles you've taken on, and to shift all of those.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, the identity is a big deal because we do make I can even make my behavior my identity, right? And it's taken me a while. I'm still trying to identify exactly who I am. I'm still learning about myself because for so many years I didn't know who I was. It's only been the last like 8, 9 years where I've really gone in and my identity isn't a mom. My identity isn't a
Yeah.
wife. My
Yes.
identity is,
Yes.
that's not who am I?
Well, who am I really? That's the question.
That
If you
yes,
add the word
exactly.
really, yes. Because if I said to you,
Exactly.
who are you? You say, you'd go, well, I'm a wife, and I'm a mother, and I'm a podcast host, and I'm this, and you would trot out all the labels. But who are you really
Mhm.
is the question to dig into.
So how do we do that? Because I mean, I know like it is a journey for me. I'm still learning about myself, right? But how does a person do that? Because imagine a listener is just hearing this stuff for the first time and they're starting to realize in their life that, well, yeah, I see these patterns in my life and I now recognize it, but I don't know how to stop it. I don't know how to get out of this.
When you're in a pattern, that's probably a sign that you should work with either a therapist or coach or counselor, because patterns are difficult to break on our own, and often we find it really difficult. So that would be a kind of a clue to work with somebody. But as you were asking, how do I change all of this? It's a process of self-inquiry. asking questions and reflection. But one thing that we can do that gives us an insight into our inner stories, to watch the words we use, to watch the
Ooh.
language. Yes.
What we say about
Because
ourselves, right?
what we say about ourselves, what we say to ourselves, what we say about others or to others. I always tell the story on, and it's, when I was, it wasn't so, it was a while ago, but I usually sleep. I've never really had big problems sleeping until, unless I've had difficult periods in my life, but generally I'm a good sleeper. And one morning I woke up and I got out of bed and I talked to myself.
I do
And
too.
whenever I say that, people go, I do too.
I may not be the first to admit it, but I'll go along with you.
Exactly. So I had like 8 really good hours sleep. I got out of bed to go to the bathroom and I heard myself say, I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Now that's interesting because I wasn't physically exhausted. I just had a great night's sleep. And then over the course of the day and the days that followed, I noticed how often I used the word exhausted, exhausting to describe myself, situations, others, and I realized, I was like, what is this? Like, it was quite eye-opening
Did you
to
did
really,
you did you realize like it didn't even go through your brain? Does that make
didn't go
sense?
through
Like
my
it's
brain.
all of a sudden you're just hearing it
Yeah,
and you're like,
and you're just
where'd
saying
that
it.
come from?
Yes, yes. So it was, so what that was, and when I sat with that, I realized it was a statement, like my inner world, my energetic state was burnt out. And so there was a real drain. And that is what I was saying. So at an identity level, what I was saying is, I can't cope. I don't have the resources to cope with my life. And there are all sorts of other stories that I would tell myself. So that was when I found that, I caught that, I was able to reframe it. So that gives you a lovely entree into your story and your identity.
Because it brings up the story that I've shared on my podcast before, where I used to talk about words and what you say about yourself. And I was in a habit for a long time and again, it was words that didn't go through my brain. They just came out of my mouth. And it was, I'm
Yeah,
so stupid.
common,
That was
very common.
so, and for years, I know I said it without even realizing I was saying it. And I can remember the day I heard it. I heard it for probably the first time that I really heard it. And I was like, wow, that didn't
Yeah,
feel good. Because then I
yeah,
stopped and I reflected on it. And when you say I am stupid, that doesn't feel good.
it doesn't. So those words, actually, it's interesting what you're saying, whether you say them out loud or even just think them, but often when you say them out loud, it actually sets off a physiological response, which is what you're describing. It doesn't feel good. You feel, I don't know, and for
You
everyone it
feel
could be
those
different things.
words.
You feel them, you feel
Hmm.
flat, you feel angry, you feel defeated,
Yeah.
whatever it is. So you got to be very careful. Words have immense energetic resonance and power. And yeah, so that's why it's really one of the reasons why it's important to watch our language.
That old saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Not true.
No, not true.
Not
Not
true.
true at all.
No, and I was raised with that and I believe that, and it's not true. Words are very powerful, whether you're saying to yourself or you're saying them to others.
Yes.
I'm becoming much more aware of my words. I have learned over the years because I can have a hot temper, and I used to joke that I could shred my ex-husband with my tongue, just with my words. Not proud of that, and I've had to work on that. So I always have to kind of take a pause when I
Yeah.
when I sense something in my body. I have to take a pause, and I got to figure out what that is, because the previous Lisa, the old Lisa, would just react and it would not be good. And I would end up having to clean up a big mess. And so
Yes.
what I've, and what this really boils down to too is, and I've said it so many times, is our self-awareness. And we have to start
Yes.
becoming aware of our body and how our body feels and how things feel. It can
Yes.
be really powerful. I shared one story, and I think you'll appreciate this. Excuse me. One of the things I lost in my childhood is my voice, and I have since it's coming back. When I recently had a situation where I I was upset about a situation and I needed a minute, and so I stepped away and I was in the bathroom and I was washing my face or brushing my teeth or something. And I just remember all of a sudden my throat, my entire throat ached so bad. I can't even tell you, I've never had my throat hurt. And it was just this deep, deep ache. And it was my whole entire throat. And I'm like, what is going on? And I realized I had processed and I had words and I knew what I was going to say in response. I needed to go right then and there and say it because I have a habit. My past habit would be thinking it through. Okay, I've got the words, and then I would chicken out and I wouldn't say them. Right.
Mhm.
But it was like my throat, my body was saying, you are going to go say this. And so I
Yes.
went out and I was very careful. That's the thing I was going to say earlier too about my hot temper is I've learned to calm my words down, calm myself down, and be careful about the words that I use to the other person because you can't take words back. That's another little saying that I grew up with, you can't take back words.
You can't. There's so much in what you're saying that I want to just kind of double click on, if you don't mind. But the one
No.
thing is talking about, how the body communicates energy to us in a very unique language. Yours, you described what was happening in your throat chakra. For me, when I feel anxiety, I always feel it in my solar plexus. That's the third chakra. It's somewhere. It's like somewhere between your belly button and your heart. And
Mm-hmm.
it's, that's that I get butterflies, I get like a sense of overwhelming dread. When I feel anger, my heart chakra starts to,
Mm-hmm.
pulsate, feel like a sense
Get
of
hot.
indignity, hot, all of that stuff. But it's interesting because you're talking, I've written so much. I want to talk about the hot temper piece because it's a lovely example of going back to identity, how our emotions can also become our identity, because
Ooh.
there's actually nothing wrong with anger.
Right.
Anger is a very healthy emotion. There are circumstances where that require us to become
Correct.
angry, to put down. But what you're describing is what we call reactive anger. And I get
Mm-hmm.
that, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It is when anger's in charge of you.
Yes. Ooh, that's a
Yeah,
good way of putting it.
yeah,
Exactly. The anger takes over.
takes
Exactly.
over. Right. And so that then becomes, no doubt, you had a label of being angry or the angry child or the this, that, and that becomes a huge part of your identity. But what's interesting about what you've just described in that hot temper is it's important to remember that we can feel any emotion, but the line that gets crossed is where we move from feeling the emotion to being the emotion, to
Ooh.
becoming the emotion. And when you're in a fit of rage, I know that that's when you are no longer feeling it, you are it, and that becomes your identity.
That's funny you say that because there was another experience that I had where I realized, and it was a situation where kind of a disrespect, right, that happened. And again, the old Lisa would have over the top, especially when there's disrespect. But I took a deep breath and I really took a deep breath. But I remember realizing that I could feel that anger in every part of my body. What you said was so true. It completely filled me for that second. And I recognized it and I'm like, whoa, no, I'm not going there. I'm going to take a deep
Yeah,
breath
yeah,
and I'm going to put this into perspective because I can tell you right now that the anger that would have come out would not have matched what really
yeah,
happened. It was not
yeah.
matching, but I absolutely, all I could say is I felt it in every part of my body.
Like a surge, like an energetic
Totally.
surge.
That's a great way
Yes.
to, yeah, that's a great way
Yeah.
to say it. Hmm.
Yeah. By the way, we feel we can become all our emotions. We can become shame.
Oh, yeah.
When you feel shame, it sits with you, it takes over you. You cringe for
Hmm.
days and
Can't look at
weeks and
people. You can't,
can't
you
look at
can't.
people.
Hmm.
Just that's the experience of shame taking over.
Mm-hmm.
Anxiety takes over where, you are just constantly on edge, hypervigilant. That was the way I would have described myself. You know, envy takes over when we
Yeah.
are unable to be happy for others and celebrate other people's success and stories. And, and that really does erode connection and relationships. So you can really place any emotion in this context and it becomes who you are, and it takes you it's in charge. You are no longer in charge of it.
That
And
is so
yeah,
true. That is the out of balance part. And that's exactly what happens, is that it takes
yes,
over, and that's exactly the way I feel. Because when you're saying that, it's like, that is the perfect, that's a perfect definition or example, or the way you're saying it, because that's exactly the way it feels, is
yeah,
all of a sudden, I have no control anymore.
yeah, yeah.
And it's such
And
a helpless feeling.
it actually is. And we go back to anger. Often we lash out to regain control. But what you've just
Right.
said is so true. We lose control. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually very counterproductive. The best thing you can do, as you put it, is, when you take a deep breath, you want to push a metaphorical pause button. For some people, it's taking a deep breath. For others, it's taking a sip of water. For others, it's going for a walk or getting out
Mm-hmm.
into the sun. But the ability to push the pause button is what you're describing, and it's so essential.
Yeah, I just say, when I feel it, I'll just say, I need a minute. I need to go process. I just need a minute,
Yeah,
because I need to go through the whole check system in my head.
yeah,
Is this, am I being triggered? Okay, so I'm angry. Does it really match, my anger match the level to what
yes,
is going on? Because that's a big
yes,
indicator right there. Because to me,
yes,
if it doesn't match,
yes.
it's usually me being triggered.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what you're doing is a psychological tactic for interrogating yourself and debunking. You're
Right.
actually testing the validity of what you're experiencing in the moment. That's a very important and very powerful psychological
Yeah.
tactic for managing our emotions.
It really is empowering, and I don't feel helpless. I feel like I am in control.
Yeah,
And because with all that, what goes on when I would get angry and blow up, then there's the shame that comes in, right? And you've got to
correct,
clean that mess up. And
correct.
again, you can't take back words, you can't take back things that you say, and
No,
it's such a vicious cycle. And
yeah,
so I always felt crappy about myself, because I felt like I was
yeah,
always screwing up, and I was always
yeah.
hurting someone or doing something, and I try to go clean it up, and you know people say, okay, I take your apology, but the relationship is never the same.
You're absolutely right. I've been thinking that since we started this conversation, that we often ask for apologies, but the damage is done, right? So yeah, it's more important to try and prevent that than to try and repair after you've exploded.
Right. So what I want to encourage my listeners to do is to first pay attention to your body, right? Get in tune with your body. What is the best way for someone to start paying attention to their body? Because I know that when I used to get in those places, there wasn't that pause moment. It
No,
went
no,
from
but you,
0 to 100,
yeah,
right? So we need to
yeah.
catch it before it gets to 100.
Yes, and you want to do things preventatively. So there's a very simple kind of technique that anyone can do. The energetic alarm clock. I don't have my mobile phone next to me, it's on the other side of the desk. But basically, what I've done in the past is, depending on how triggered I'm feeling, I might set my alarm clock for every hour of the day between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. Or I might set it for 3 times in the day. And when it goes off, sit down, I take a minute out of my day, and it's my reminder to go within and to ask a very simple question, like, how am I feeling right now? Or am I feeling heavy or light? You can be a little bit more specific than how am I feeling. Now you can say, am I feeling open or closed, heavy or light, high or low, and find
Mm-hmm.
the right words. And then just sit with that. And what it requires of us is just a moment of inner reflection and just answering that question. So sense into your body. What I like to work with, because I work with energy, you can think of your whole physical body, or you can sense into your energetic body, your chakras. So there are hundreds of chakras, but 7 primary ones. The root chakra is just above your pubic bone there, and that, if you're feeling a sensation there, the chances are you're experiencing something to do with survival, anxiety, stress. If you feel a sensation in your sacral chakra, which is between just below your belly button, then that you've got an emotional trigger happening. That's the seat of our emotions, desires, sexuality. If you feel a sensation in your solar plexus, I spoke about that earlier, which is between your belly button and your heart, if you're feeling, I don't know, butterflies or whatever it is, then that's a sense that you're feeling out of control, that you've lost your agency. If you feel it in your heart chakra, that's an indication that you are dealing with connection issues, love issues, relationship issues. Throat chakra, which is what you described, that's to do with your self-expression. Something's either being held back or being overly expressed. Third eye, probably something to do with your intuition. And your crown chakra is more to do with your connection to the divine and spirituality. So there, you can feel into your physical body, but if you feel into your chakra system, you can work out what each one means. And it gives you a little bit more of a compass.
Right. That is interesting. That throat one, I'm telling you, that was just, I've never experienced anything like it. Was my entire throat. It wasn't just it was the entire, I'm like, this really, really hurts.
Yes, it's interesting. When I released a block in my throat chakra, so a block, an energetic block in the throat chakra can manifest in 2 ways. It can be an inability to speak your truth, or it can be an overexpression, like you vomit stuff out and you have no regulation of what you say. And so when I started healing my throat chakra, I had a sense for a few days. I was like coughing. It felt like dust, but of course it wasn't. But I was coughing like that. And it was just before I went to my level 3 live event in Colorado in the USA. And when I got there, our teacher did an energy healing and activation on us, and I had a major coughing fit. I had to be taken out the class, and I coughed for like 10 or 15 minutes, like gagging almost. And then the block was gone. Isn't that interesting?
Oh.
Yes. And then I was better able to regulate my emotional expression. So we really feel our blocks in particular ways, and we feel the release of them in particular ways as well. And I just like working with the chakra system because, as I said earlier, it just is a little bit of a navigation tool. Because say, for example, you focusing on your body and your right arm feels tense. Like, what does that actually mean? Whereas the chakra system, there's method behind it. And you can either Google or work with an energy coach who can help explain, dig beneath the surface and understand what's going on in that particular chakra and what it represents in your life.
That kind of reminds me too, and I have a girlfriend that she has the same thing, that I recognize, and I didn't recognize this until many years later, and I've had a lot of injuries on my body, is that I was always tense.
Right.
Always tense. And I'm still that way. My body automatically goes there unless I'm aware of it. And I'm constantly catching
your
myself.
Default.
It is my default. And I've been working on it for probably a good solid 2 years of, taking a minute and go, oh yeah, I'm kind of tight, and take a deep breath and get myself to relax. But my default is definitely tense. If I go and get a manicure, they're having to like constantly get me to, move my hand because I'm tight, and I don't know what it's like not to. I'm learning that. I'm learning how to, because I remember saying to my nail lady one time, I'm like, I realize that, but how am I relaxed now? Like am I relaxed now? And she's like, no. And I'm like, I don't know how to relax.
That's very interesting because you're not even aware what the feeling and experience of relaxation is. But what would be interesting at an energetic level, what I would do is I would read your energy. I would go
Okay.
in, I would read your energy, and I would find, because that's the physical manifestation.
Of
Where
something
is the
else.
Yes, where is the root? What's this block about? Where is it located? Now, of course, I don't know because I'm not tuned into your energy. I'm not in state at the moment, but I'm going to give you some fictitious examples, right?
Okay.
It could be that if I were to read your energy, I'd find that the root of the block was in your solar plexus, okay? Because that clenched, tense
Mm-hmm.
thing is potentially related, and I'm just being fictitious here, potentially related to something that's happened to you that's created a tendency to want to over control things. That's just an example. And control
Yeah.
is okay. Or, for example, it could be I might find something in your root chakra, which is where survival issues
Mm-hmm.
sit, right? So you might have had an experience in your past that's unresolved, that's left an energetic footprint
Yeah.
in your root chakra, and that survival, that sense of could be what's making your physical body clench up. It could be
Yeah.
you have a block in your throat. I'm just really ad-libbing here. Block
Yeah.
in your throat chakra where you haven't been able to express yourself. So the sense of withholding, holding on to things could be expressing themselves in your physical body. So it's really interesting work because it allows you to pinpoint the superficial symptoms and go in, find, and I know your podcast talks a lot about, efficiency. The quickest way to heal energy is
Mm-hmm.
one of those things, because when you find that energetic inception point, where does it sit, and you release it, then the physical symptoms go away and the triggers
Yeah.
go away, everything goes away.
Yeah. I mean, trauma, it really is stored in your body. I know that. I know that to be true. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
so why not? Yeah. I might have a session with you because I want to figure this out because I'm aware of it. And when I'm aware of it, I can get myself to relax, but I don't know, am I completely relaxed? And this is going to sound really funny, but this is what really opened my eyes to trying to understand what the normal relaxed is, right? So our dogs, we have two border collies, and in
Mm.
the evening and in the morning, they are allowed up on the couch and they cuddle with us. And my guy, his name's Alex,
Oh.
he will lay across my legs with his head, and it's like dead weight.
Mm.
Right. And what caught my attention is it hurt because his head's heavy. But I realized he's really relaxed. He's relaxed,
Yes.
like he gets it. And I'm trying to understand that. Does that sound, that's kind of a funny example, but it really made
No,
me
it's
aware
not.
of,
Yes.
I'm like, he's heavy, like he's dead weight, and he is so relaxed and he's so comfortable. I don't know how to do that.
Yes. Well, I think you do know how to do it. You've forgotten how to do it.
Yeah.
Unless your block developed in utero, which
Mm,
is possibility, that it
yeah.
was like when you were in your mum's womb, something happened to her that created this tense, energetic stamp around you,
Hmm.
or unless it was passed on from generations, previous
Yeah.
generations, that's a possibility. So, but if it's a childhood, if it started in childhood, that's one thing I can kind of look to find, where did it start? Um, if it started in childhood, then you weren't born with it. You
Right.
developed this, it's an adaptive response
And I think
to
that's what it is.
anxiety.
I
Yeah,
think it is. I mean, my childhood abuse started as far back as I can remember. I don't know what it was like not to have it, right? Because
right,
I had it from my brother to begin with, and then it was
right.
my parents. So I was surrounded with it. So I would imagine I was pretty tense. And the control thing is another area for sure. And I can remember the day that I realized that I don't have control over anything except myself. And I was quite angry, to be honest with you.
Yes,
When I had
yes.
that realization, that moment, I was angry. I actually stood up and yelled.
That's a very healthy expression of anger. I'm very, very sorry to hear about this. And we there are different kinds of abuse we suffer as
Yeah.
children. And I'm really sorry about what you have. It's very in your face. But what you're talking about is that often anger is the flip side of anxiety. I know that from my own story.
Mm,
And it's the secondary emotion, right? The primary
mm,
emotion is fear, anxiety, but it's expressed as rage. But what
mhm,
you're describing in that moment is, just to circle back to what we spoke about at the beginning of the conversation, is a healthy expression of anger. If you've been abused constantly by multiple people who're supposed to love you, then anger is a very healthy expression. It's a wonderful release valve, and it's
mhm,
highly appropriate,
mhm.
highly appropriate. Yeah,
Yeah, I worked through a lot of that. Um,
good.
I'm still working through it with my parents a little bit, but with my brother, I've completely resolved that. And
Then,
he's not in my life anymore.
well, that's one way of resolving things. There's a beautiful, I was listening to a podcast about a month ago. I was in my car, and this guy was talking about this incredible definition of forgiveness,
Mm.
and it might help. He said, forgiveness is when your past no longer is when you no longer want to change your past.
Oh, yeah.
That's a big
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I know mine's similar to that in that my I realized that I had forgiven my brother when I no longer have anger towards him, when I can tell the stories and I feel like I'm telling someone else's story. It's not my story
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't have that effect on me anymore. The
Yes.
emotions don't rise up anymore. Um, that's it took me a long time to get there with him, but
Mm.
I've been there for a while. I've just had over the last few years some realizations about my parents that I didn't realize before, and I think that that's why the anger I'm working processing it, and so the anger it's definitely better. For a while I was pretty pissed off at my dad for a long time, and
Mm.
now I have moments, um, and I was going to the place of when that anger would rise up of, well, both of them had, abuse in their life too. They couldn't help what they did. And it's like, no, no, no. I'm not dismissing how I feel about this. You know, I need to feel the emotions. And that's what I've been doing is feeling the emotions,
Yeah.
whether it's anger or
Yeah.
sadness. There's
Yes.
grief there. There's a lot
There's
of
grief.
grief. Hmm.
There's a lot of grief. I have, because I work with sacred geometry in my practice, advanced sacred geometry. That's my modality of energy healing. And I have got an advanced sacred geometry sequence that is designed specifically for total forgiveness, to
Ooh.
release deep, deep forgiveness. I've done it on myself. I've worked with others. It is a very profound process of deep release, and
Mm,
um, it doesn't mean that like the person is forgiven per se, but it means that in your case,
you're
it no
released.
longer, you're released. It no longer has resonance. You're no longer triggered by it. That's what you were
Right.
describing. You've released that part of your identity. That's part of your story. Is no
Mm,
longer playing out and taking over you.
right. And I've said this before that forgiveness is really for me. It's not, it doesn't release that person from what they did. It
Correct.
has nothing to do with them other than it's releasing me from that bondage of anger and that can turn into bitterness and resentment. And I've seen people, I mean, my own father, he lived his entire life never forgiving his parents. And he was a shell of a man of who he really could have been.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
love my dad. And we had,
Yeah.
I mean, I really adored him because of all the people in my life that were abusing me, he was the one that did it the least. So,
Mm.
I felt more comfortable with him. But it's sad because he struggled with severe depression and all of it. And I know that that just exacerbates your situation if you have unforgiveness. But I want my listeners to know what I'm saying when you forgive someone, it does not release them from what they did to you at all. And it doesn't make it okay. And you are not saying, oh, what you did to me is okay. What you're saying is, you have no power over me anymore. I'm going to choose to forgive you so that I can live in freedom. I'm not
Yeah.
living in bitterness and resentment.
Yeah, that's right. And I always put it this way. I don't know if you know the Sufi poet Rumi, he's mystic as well. He's got this magnificent quote that says something along the lines of, why do you stay in prison when the door is so wide open? And forgiveness is, well, when we don't forgive, we're trapped in that invisible spiritual prison. You know,
Yeah.
and the bars of resentment, anger, self-pity, you know, they keep us trapped, but the door is actually wide open and forgiveness is the path out of that door. And so it sounds very much like you've done a lot of work to a lot of release, actually, which
Yeah,
is, it is incredible.
it is. And I hear that from a lot of people, and it's like it's just who I am, but I so badly wanted to get away from the way I felt.
Yeah,
I hated it.
yeah,
Like at 19, that's what I did. I remember thinking at 19 years old, I don't like the way I feel. I never considered myself broken, but I did, and I didn't realize it at the time. What it was I was feeling was pain. I was feeling this deep pain. I didn't realize where it was coming from, but I started my search then. I
yes,
got to get
yes,
this out of me. I knew I had to get it
yes,
out. I just had no idea how.
yes. You're describing a catalyst for change, and
Mm.
mine was very similar because when I listened to a podcast to a woman who had also been trapped in anxiety for a long time, I realized that it was no longer tenable. I didn't want to live with constant anxiety. I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't tolerate it another moment. And we often, most of us actually, this is another phenomenon in human transformation. Most of us carry on, carry on, carry on until the status quo is no longer tenable. And that there's often a moment, a kind of a stimulus, a catalyst for that. Because we're not going to step onto the starting blocks and move, you know, forward in our lives unless there's something to move forward from. So the catalyst is a really important part of really changing. And often we have to be desperate or feeling like
Mhm.
I've had enough to really start the process of change.
And sometimes that change can be really big, like, yeah. Because
Yeah,
I'll tell you after, and I don't badmouth my ex-husband at all. We both had our stuff. But I will say once I got out of that relationship and really started looking at myself, because I'm telling you, there were actually when we separated, there were so many triggers that was going on within me, and I was all over the place. And I really had to take some time and look at myself and go deep. And that's when my healing really began to exacerbate, really. And
yeah,
but there's also more tools out there now that wasn't there before.
correct.
But
Yes.
I look back at that and I look at my life today and it is so vastly different. And my healing journey, it's a lifelong commitment that I've made. And I will continue to grow. I am having aha moments all the time. I'm doing so much research on trauma and abuse. I'm learning so much. It's mind blowing sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it sounds wonderful. And I commend you because a lot of people don't have the courage, the stamina, or even the desire to change their lives. So really it's a big deal what you just shared.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. It's been quite the journey.
I imagine I can believe it. Mine as well.
Yes.
Decades. Yeah,
So tell the listeners a little bit about your energy coaching and how they can reach out to you and what you can help them with,
yeah.
and how they can contact you.
Good. Well, I'm an accredited coach. I became a coach when I worked in organizational psychology. And the process of coaching is the generic process of coaching is a mixture of, holding up the mirror, sharing insights, but ultimately getting a person to move from point A to point B, which often has lots of steps along the way, helping people move forward in their lives. So when you throw energy work onto that, what that means is I'm helping people understand their patterns and release the energetic root of that. So we do work with contemporary psychological challenges like, trauma, abuse, and so forth. But we are the healing takes place at an energetic level. And what I'm teaching people is how to master their own energy. And I teach people techniques and tools for releasing blocks, for preventing blocks, for protecting their energy, all sorts of great things.
Oh, that's some good stuff. I mean, protecting your energy and
very
and
big.
stopping blocks. How would you stop a block?
Well, to release a block, I'd have to teach you, and it would be a graduated process of working with sacred geometry and working with the chakras. So there are techniques that you can use to read your energy and your chakras, to release and then remove blocks and then replace them with different energy. So that's something I can't really share now.
No, but I'm just saying,
yes.
it's interesting because you said you can stop the blocks, right? Like
prevent blocks from happening.
Yeah.
Yes. So there are things that we can do to become more aware of our energy, and then to interrupt downward spirals. So part of that is awareness, but there are, I mean, let's just use the energy alarm clock as an example. That's a simple technique for preventing energetic downward spirals and blocks compounding. So there are things that we can do with awareness and a few simple tools to stop or arrest the downward spiral of our energy. That's what I mean.
Okay, that's interesting.
So I teach people that, and I've got a variety. I've got a group coaching program, I've got a individual coaching programs, variety of them. But ultimately, what we're doing is I'm doing a lot of the release, but I'm going in and out. The promise is to go in, find and release the biggest block holding you back.
And then do people do maintenance? I mean, that sounds kind of silly, but do they do maintenance?
Yes, they do.
I think you would have to.
You would have to, because sometimes energy blocks can be released in a session. Sometimes it takes a few sessions, which is a lot. That's why I like coaching, because I'm doing the release multiple times, particularly stubborn block. But I'm also teaching you how to do it on yourself. Because ultimately, my philosophy has always been that it is the client who owns the problem, the solution to the problem. That's the fundamentals of therapy. So your therapist, your coach, they can't solve your problems for you. You're the only one. You have the agency. So that's why I prefer reducing dependence on me and giving people the tools to do it themselves. And that's the part of the coaching process.
Oh, I like that you said that, because a lot of people think, oh, I have to be in therapy for years. Oh, I have to be in coaching for years. And what you're saying is your goal is to help them release and teach them how to do this themselves, so they are not dependent on you, that they can go out and be on their, now they come back for maintenance, but at least when they're out in the world, they know how, if something comes up, they're now equipped on how to handle that.
They really are. I mean, with my most stubborn block around grief and anxiety, I turned to one of my mentors to do it, because sometimes even as an energy master, you rather want someone else to do your stuff for you. And it took 3 sessions. The first, and every time I felt it came back, it felt less intense. So the first experience, like before I went in for my first block, I never went back to that level of overwhelm and intensity. So, there's always release in every session, but sometimes to get to the real root of it, and I'll know when I've got the root of it, takes multiple sessions, but it's still the fastest and most permanent way of moving forward in your life.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so tell our listeners, I got a couple questions. So tell our listeners how they can reach out to you. And of course, we'll have all this available for everybody as well, all the links and everything. But how could the listeners reach out to you?
Well, via my website, there are multiple ways of reaching out to me, including, the 30-minute vision call, which is free. You get an opportunity to work with me to identify your biggest blocks and chart a way forward. And so my website is generativegrowth.com.au. But the other way of getting hold of me is just look me up on Instagram, either follow me, DM me. I'm very responsive. I'm Gabrielle.Pimstone, and we can make connection that way.
Nice. And then what do you want to leave the listeners with?
A message. Or, okay. Well, I think, in the spirit of your tagline, I think that it's important for people to know that energy runs the show, and releasing your blocks at an energetic level is the fastest and most permanent way of moving forward in your life. So it doesn't take a long time. It's not a huge investment, but it's really, it's going to circumvent and save you years and years of talk therapy.
I like how you say investment, because that's what I say about it. When you're, putting money into therapy or coaching or energy work, you're investing in yourself. That's how you need to look at it. You're not going and spending money, you're investing in yourself.
Absolutely.
And I highly encourage it.
So do I.
Well, thank you so much. This has been great. I always like hearing about energy work. It absolutely fascinates me. I've never gone through having that done, and I'm really seriously thinking about it. I know, look at your eyes got all big. Like, seriously. It's scary, but I'm open to it.
You'll find a lot of value, especially if you've done a lot of work on yourself, because your self-awareness is there, so you can get right into the energy work.
Right, right. Well, thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much. And I'm always grateful to podcast hosts like you who offer this platform. So thank you.
Oh yeah, let's get the word out. Let's help shorten people's pain, right?
That's it.